Okay, in this video we're looking at an introduction to scatter graphs and what they are, and we're going to be looking at how to plot a scatter graph also, as you'll see later. Now, what is a scatter graph? A scatter graph typically shows two variables plotted against each other for a set of data. So let's look at an example. So you can see here we've got an example of a scatter graph where you've got two variables which are temperature and sales. And just roughly you can see a bit of a pattern here, which is as the temperature gets bigger, so if you start off really small, temperature, a low temperature, the sales aren't very big. But as the temperature increases, let's say up to about 20 degrees, the sales are about 400, they're getting bigger. As the temperature gets really big, the sales get really, really big. Okay, so you can see you've got a relationship here. And this could be for something like ice cream sales, right? As the hotter it gets, the higher the temperature gets, you're going to sell more ice creams. That could be the example of what is going on with this scatter diagram. So you've got this kind of upward trend, which we call positive correlation, but we'll talk more about that in the next video. Now, you can see here we've got the upward trend. Over here, we've got kind of the opposite, a negative trend. And we've got the age and the value of a car. You've got age in years of the car and the value of the car here. And it's just saying when the age of the car in years is really small, so like when the car is brand new after 0 years, the value of the car is really, really high, which makes sense. When you buy a brand new car, it's worth a lot more. But as the time goes on, okay, like down here, the value of the car massively goes down, it depreciates. And that makes sense because as cars get older, they're worth less because they get damaged and things go wrong and they just don't look as good, all that kind of stuff. So this is a different kind of relationship, okay, which we would call negative correlation, but we'll talk about more of that in the next video. But just to show you roughly what a scatter diagram is all about. Now, in this video, we're just going to look at plotting a scatter graph, in this case for science marks against maths marks, onto a grid, as you can see here. And it says, what patterns do you notice? So let's go through this. Now, first of all, right, I need to go and draw in my things down here, my axis, and I'm doing maths against science. And actually in this question, it doesn't matter whether I go maths on the bottom or side, it doesn't matter. So let's just go and put down here, let's go and put maths down here. And then we're gonna be plotting it against the science mark, which is gonna be going over here. Now, the lowest science mark or maths mark is, I think it's 16, okay, and the highest mark I can see is 93, so it would be sensible to go between something like 0 and 100, and hopefully this is going to work out nicely. So if I start off at 0 here and I go up in 10, so 10 and then 20, it should work out nicely that I get a good fit here, 60, 70, 80, 90, and then 100, perfect. It works out nicely. I'll do the same going up here, so 0 and then 10, let's make that a little bit neater, 0, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, and then, last but not least, we've got 100. Okay, and then these here are coordinates that I can plot on the grid. So it's saying when one person gets a science mark of 57, in maths they get a mark of 60. So we can go and plot that onto our grid. I'll try and do this as neatly and as quickly as possible. So science, they're going to be getting 57. Okay, science 57 is going to be about here, and maths is going to be 60, so somewhere over here. And of course, like when it's 57, it's quite hard to get it really accurate, but you just have to do the best you can with it and plot it onto your grid. So there we go. There's roughly, well, that's pretty accurate on the first one. We've then got 31 and we've got 40, so let's go do that. 31 science and 40 maths is going to be going about there. 81, 90, you've got science, 81, maths, 90 is going to be going over here. Good, and then you've got 34 and an 88, so where's that going to go? 34 and 88 is going to be about there-ish. Okay, I'll try and do it as accurately as I can. 93 and 85, so maybe you're sort of noticing the relationship between the two things already. That's going to be going about there, isn't it? 93, 85. You then got 16 and then 25, so you know they get a low science mark and they also get a pretty low maths mark. There we go, let's put it in there. We get 24, 35. Again, they're both pretty low. Okay, 24 and then 35. There we go, about there. 60, 65 is going to be going 60, 65 is going to be going about here. You've then got 75 and 73. So again, a pretty high mark and a pretty high mark in both. About sort of there-ish. And then 44 and 42. Okay, and kind of medium level marks. 44, which is there. 42, which is somewhere going to be about there. Okay, so I've plotted all of the points onto my scatter diagram, and what's the overall trend or the pattern that you can see here? Well, looking at this here, you can kind of see as the maths marks get bigger, so when the maths marks are quite low, like this one for example, the science mark is also pretty low, okay? But as the maths mark increases, you can, like for this point up here, also the science mark is getting bigger. And then as it gets really big, like for this point up here, the science mark is also really, really big. However, there is an exception to this, which is this point down here, which doesn't really follow the trend. But I'll talk more about that point in a second. But overall, the pattern is, right, as the maths mark increases, the science mark also increases. Okay, which kind of makes sense because probably, not always, but if you're, the better you are at maths, you're probably going to be better at science also. You know, if you quite like, if you like working and your maths is good, your science is probably going to be quite good also. Okay, and similarly, if you're pretty good at science, you know, you might be pretty good at maths also, and that's the pattern here. Apart from this person here, which is kind of saying, well, they've got a really high maths mark of about, I think it's 88, isn't it? But the science mark is pretty low, relatively, at 34. So this doesn't really follow the pattern. And actually, we call this point here, and we'll talk about more of this in a later video, this is called an outlier, because it doesn't follow the pattern. Okay, so what pattern do you notice? Just quickly, I'll type up over here. The pattern is something like this. As the maths marks increase, so do the science marks, with the exception of the outlier, the point in green, which if we look at our data, I think they get, which is the point 3488, so that's, or 8834, so 8834. That's what we're saying. They get a maths mark really high of 88 and a science mark of 34. So this point is this one here. Okay, so just kind of quickly, right? That's the trend. That's the pattern. And that's it really for an introduction to scatter graphs. I just want to get you a bit of a flavour to what it's all about. And on the next video, we'll talk more in detail about the patterns and the things that you can understand with scatter graphs. Okay, thank you for watching.